outdoorsy divers. Thank you for signing in. It is Facebook Live 2023. Woohoo! All right. Hey guys, how have you been? I'm sorry we took like a whole month off of Facebook Live. I'm so sorry. We had to rearrange the way we're doing our Facebook these days. And if you guys haven't noticed, we're starting to do a brand page. So it's one page. You don't have to go to 5 different pages. And then we have our location pages so you can tag yourself when you're at the store directly if you want to do a check-in. But so if you want any information, it's going to be right here at this brand page. And we're super excited because it'll help it make it easier on you guys to follow what we have cooked up for whether it's presentations, trips, events, sales, or just, information about products. And our daily dive reports are usually on our main brand page now. So, all right. Well, we have a fantastic presentation planned tonight, and we'll get to you guys. Everyone say hello to the I.CARE folks. There they are. We're going to get to them in just a second. If you are new to our Facebook Lives, you want to make sure that you go to that Eventbrite link that was in the events write-up, because at 6:45, I'm going to shut that down, and I'm going to pull from that list of who registered, and we're going to go ahead and give away something tonight. Tonight, we're going to give away an SDI
Nitrox course.
Yeah, Enriched Air Nitrox course, the digital portion, the academics. So if you guys are not Nitrox certified and you want to get that cert, make sure you go to www.force-e.com tonight before 6:45. All right, we got people signing in. Woohoo! Hey guys, thank you. If you don't know me, my name is Nicole. I'm your social media gal, and we have travel manager
Rachel. What's up, guys?
All right, so let's go around the Facebook Live and introduce. We've got Kylie. Hi, Kylie.
Hello, everybody.
And what do you do over at I.CARE?
So I am one of the co-founders at I.CARE, and my specialty is more on the science side.
Awesome. And we've got Michael. Michael, say hello to everyone.
Nice to meet everyone. And I'm also a co-founder at I.CARE, and I'm also a dive shop owner of Key Dives down in Islamorada. And after tonight, later on this month, you all get a chance to get down with us and do some coral planting. So hopefully you sign up for that trip. You'll get a chance to spend more time with me at that side.
Woo, exciting. Excellent. Yes. Yeah. So Rachel, at the end of the presentation, she's going to go over our coral restoration weekend with the I.CARE folks. So make sure you stay tuned for that information, or you can go to our website and you can find that on the event page or the trip page. So guys, the presentation tonight, I'm going to let you guys take it over. It's about the I.CARE's Coral Reef Restoration Organization in Islamorada.
All right, awesome. Thank you all so much for tuning in this evening. So my name is Kylie Smith, and I am one of the co-founders of I.CARE, and I am also speaking on behalf of Michael Goldberg. If you guys are able to come down to join us to do some of our coral restoration work, you will be able to interact with both of us as well as the whole team. So I.CARE, we are an organization focusing on restoring the coral reefs of Islamorada. So why Islamorada, you might say? I'm not having my slide. There we go. All right, awesome. So why Islamorada? So if you haven't been diving down here, hopefully you can make a trip soon. And if you have been diving here, hopefully you remember the incredible fish life that we have on our reefs. These photos here are taken from Alligator Reef. And probably the most common comment we get about alligator is, wow, it's like an aquarium. We get schools of hundreds of fish. We get tons of turtles, green moray eels, and tons of sharks. Seen nurse sharks, bull sharks, as well as hammerheads. So it's a really awesome sight. But unfortunately, if you focus in on the bottom, our coral cover is not doing very well. And so tonight I'm going to talk to you about what's been going on with corals, why should we care about their conservation, and talk to you a lot about what we're doing at I.CARE to try to fix it. So before we get started, I want to make sure that everybody is on the same page about what is a coral. So a coral is actually an animal, and it's made up of these individual cup-like structures called polyps. And these structures are the actual animal that's covered in soft tissue. And all of these polyps have little tentacles that they can stick out, and that's what they use to capture prey that's swimming by. A lot of times you may hear us use the term colony to describe a coral, and that's simply just a collection of polyps. Now, corals are actually pretty cool. They're not only an animal, but they also can make their own skeleton. So as they grow, they secrete a skeleton made out of calcium carbonate. And underneath that layer of tissue, there's these little circles that most of the time they're circles. That these are called corallites, and that corallite can tell you a lot about the species of the coral. So corals are in fact animals, but they're kind of a rock too because they do secrete their own skeleton. So corals may look like a really simple organism, but they actually have a very complex life cycle. So they start out as those individual polyps with their tentacles that are out getting ready to feed. And these guys will undergo what's called asexual reproduction. So that's just making tons and tons of clones of itself to create a larger colony. When the colony gets to be a certain size and a certain age, it will undergo something called sexual reproduction. Now, these are really cool synchronous spawning events that here in the Keys, they happen around end of August, a few days after the full moon. But corals will release either their sperm or their eggs in these synchronized events so that the sperm can fertilize the egg and develop into a larvae. Now, the larvae will spend a couple of days in the water column, and during this time, something really important happens. The larvae will pick up these tiny little algal cells known as zooxanthellae. And they have this mutualistic relationship between these algal cells and the coral. So the coral provides structure and protection for that tiny algal cell. And in return, while that algal cell is inside the coral, it's photosynthesizing. And all of the sugars, that's the byproduct of that photosynthesis, the corals use that as food. So it uses it to grow, that energy to reproduce. As a matter of fact, corals get 90% of their energy from these zooxanthellae. Another important benefit that these tiny algal cells bring is that's what gives corals their color. So anytime you see those beautiful browns or oranges, pinks, kind of some green shades, it's not actually the coral giving off that color. It's the amount and type of those tiny algal cells inside. So coral tissue is naturally transparent. So just kind of a fun fact. So yes, technically corals are animals, but they secrete their own skeletons, so they're kind of a rock, and they have this really cool relationship with algal cells, kind of making them a plant too. So these larvae will spend anywhere from 2 to 7 days in the water column until they find a place on the reef where they can settle. They'll develop into a polyp and they'll start the cycle all over again. So very, very cool life cycle for such a tiny and what looks to be a very simple organism. And so why are corals so important? Why should we fight to save these guys? Well, coral reefs are considered biodiversity hotspots. They support up to 25% of all ocean life at some point throughout their life cycle. That's an incredible figure, given the fact that corals take up less than 1% of the ocean floor. Coral reefs not only help out ocean life, but they also help support human populations. They have what's called a blue economy. So they support places through ecotourism, the divers and snorkelers that come to interact with the reefs, the fishermen that come down, as well as they also help support those fisheries. So there are tons of island nations and nations across the globe that they get all of their protein from these coral reefs. Coral reefs also provide a lot of protection to our shorelines. So this is just a blown up figure that was in the bottom of the last screen. So these coral reefs help provide protection to our shorelines during storms and hurricanes. So if you go out past the reef crest into open water on a really windy day, you're going to see some really large waves. But once you come inside that reef crest, things start to flatten out. And that's because the coral reef is reducing about 97% of that wave energy and can reduce wave height up to 84%. So when we get those big hurricanes, the Florida Reef Tract is really protecting our homes and businesses from the effects of those storms. Unfortunately, coral has been declining since the 1970s, and this is something that we have seen throughout the Indo-Pacific as well as the Caribbean. Unfortunately, that decline here in the Caribbean has been worse at about 20% loss each decade. And so we're really moving away from these coral-dominated complex ecosystems. You can see in the top two pictures here. There's all of this space for critters to hide, to find food, to raise their families. But as these corals are dying, that structure is no longer there. We're shifting to a flattened, degraded system that just doesn't have as many resources like on those bottom two. And so coral is declining for a lot of different reasons, but I'm only going to touch on two of them. And being from South Florida, these two might be ones that you have heard of. The first is what we call coral bleaching. So coral bleaching happens when a coral gets stressed out, usually due to temperature. So corals have an optimum temperature that they're really happy in. And if the temperature goes outside of that optimum for too long, it stresses the corals. This can happen when the water is too cold, but typically it happens when the water gets too hot. And so if you remember back to that mutualistic relationship that these corals have with those tiny algal cells, remember, it's the algal cells that give the coral its color. And so what happens is when a coral gets stressed out, it looks inside, see those tiny algal cells, and thinks, maybe this is what's making me sick. So they actually expel those tiny algal cells, which is really not their best move because they're getting rid of those organisms that provide up to 90% of their energy. And so when you see a bleached coral, remember that that tissue is transparent. So you're not seeing dead coral. The tissue's still alive, but you're seeing the white skeleton underneath that live tissue. Corals can survive for a certain amount of time without their zooxanthellae. They can use their tentacles to catch their own food, but corals are really not great at catching their own food. And so a lot of the times they end up dying and that structure will start to degrade. However, it is possible, they have seen signs that these corals are able to reuptake those algal cells if the water temperature returns to that happy optimum that those corals are able to grow in. So coral bleaching is probably one of the most well-known stressors that are challenging our coral reefs. Another one is disease. And so I talk specifically about stony coral tissue loss disease because we've seen major impacts throughout South Florida and now into the Caribbean. So just like in human populations, diseases are completely normal. Unfortunately, because coral cover is already so
No. Hey guys, that's weird. Not sure what happened. If you guys can hear me. I know, and I can hear myself on Facebook, so I'm not sure what happened. Hold on, guys. Just let's see if Kylie gets back on here. Hi guys, you can all see me, right? And type in the comment section if you can see us on Facebook. Awesome. I know you guys can hear us, but you can see me. Hold on, something happened with Kylie. Maybe a internet surge, or maybe that Chinese balloon decided to hit the something in the sky there. The towers.
Wi-Fi towers. Oh, she's back. Yay.
Yay.
Hey, we got Kylie.
All right, Kylie.
Hey guys, I guess we'll give this a try again.
Yeah, go ahead and reshare your screen and we'll pop you back in.
Perfect.
All right. Did I at least make it through coral bleaching with everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Perfect.
You're on the stony coral disease.
Perfect. All right. Sorry for that technical glitch. So I'm just going to start this slide over because I wasn't sure where we got to. So just like in humans, diseases can be a big problem in our corals. And specifically, I wanted to talk about one that has impacted South Florida quite a bit over the last couple of years. So stony coral tissue loss is a disease that began near Fort Lauderdale in 2014, and it reached us here in the middle Florida Keys in about 2016, 2017. This disease has been such a big deal for us because it impacts 23 of the 45 reef-building coral species that make up our reef on the Florida Reef Tract. It also progresses incredibly quickly. So this big coral head that is maybe 300 or 400 years old, it will wipe it out in less than a month. The good news is that there is tons of active research that's being done to try to understand what's causing this disease, how it's spread, and probably most importantly, how to treat it. They have had success with treating some of the disease lesions with antibiotics, but of course, you can probably imagine there's a lot of manpower associated with that. And so, despite all of the challenges that our corals are facing, it seems to be that our declines have been happening much more rapidly over the past decade or so. And so we used to have, back in the 70s, the Florida Keys Reef Tract had anywhere from 50 to 60% live coral cover. We are now down to 3%. And it's happening so quickly. This is the same coral head on the deeper side of Alligator Reef, just 4 years apart. And so one of the big issues on our end is we were having divers come down and jump in the water and see this coral head on the right and think, that's a beautiful coral head. And so we realized that we need to do some work on educating people to let them know what a healthy coral reef should actually look like. And so that's a big part of what we do here at I.CARE. So there are a lot of really great organizations fighting the fight, working to restore our coral reefs. So what makes I.CARE different is we partner with local dive shops and we train their customers, their recreational divers, to get involved and be a part of the solution. So we run transplant trips to get divers out to actually put coral out on the reef, and they also help us do some maintenance and monitoring of these corals. And this has been an awesome way to get divers involved, to use that army of passionate divers who already love the ocean to really get them to be an active part of restoration. And we've been able to work with both visitors and locals and help them understand why coral reefs are so important and worth saving. So I do have a video. We'll see if it will play. And this is just to give you a little taste of what it looks like when we transplant underwater. All right, so hopefully that gets you excited about getting back in the water and hopefully coming down and getting involved. So when can you do this? We run coral transplant trips up to 5 times every month. So these are typically on the weekends, and we bounce between different dive shops here in Islamorada. So the first and third Saturday is with Islamorada Dive Center. The second and fourth Saturday of every month is with Key Dives. And then we do a trip on the third Sunday with Concord Public Divers. But we're always happy, depending on boat availability and the corals we have in stock, to book private days. We've worked quite a bit with some educational groups around the country, as well as with dive groups from around the country. No matter when you do your coral transplant trip, we always start off by providing the proper training. So we host these trainings at Bud and Mary's Marina in Islamorada from 8:30 to 10:30. And we show you not only the presentation about why corals are important, but we also do this hands-on demonstration that gives everyone the opportunity to use the tools and run through the motions that they'll do underwater, where we can actually ask questions. Another part of what makes us different is we do monitoring and maintenance on 100% of the corals that we transplant. So we go back at 1 week, 1 month, and annually for up to 3 years to check on all of our new coral babies to see how they're growing and see what we can do to help them thrive. So we'll go out with scrub brushes and remove competitive algae. We'll go out with tools to help to either tighten or resecure our corals to the substrate. And this has been a really great way to get some of our locals involved too. Our team also does quarterly surveys where we monitor the reef community. So we wanted to be able to address the question of how is our large-scale restoration work influencing our reef fish populations, our invertebrates, so all of our crabs, lobsters, and urchins. And we also look at our community of natural corals. So we can see, are we potentially seeing new recruitment of coral babies? And so our team does all of these surveys once a quarter so we can kind of relate that back to our transplanting effort. Another thing that we provide is tours of a land-based coral nursery. So I have to give a huge shout out to our partners at Mote Marine Laboratory. Mote, as part of our partnership, installed a land-based coral nursery right at Bud and Mary's Marina. So we're able to incorporate a tour of this facility into our educational session. So people can come down, whether they're divers or non-divers, and see corals in these habitats, learn about some of these different coral species, and also learn about the coral husbandry side. So while I'm talking about Mote, I do have to talk about some of the amazing science that they do. So not only does Mote help us out by providing that land-based coral nursery, they also provide I.CARE with the majority of the corals that we transplant. So probably one of the largest criticisms that restoration organizations get is conditions on the reef are not great. So why keep putting coral out if they're not going to survive? Well, Mote is doing some amazing science to help us try to hedge our bets and put all of our resources to the corals that will survive. So the way that Mote gets their corals, they go out to the reef and they collect samples from surviving corals, which means they've survived the last several decades. They've dealt with stony coral tissue loss disease and bleaching events and all of our hurricanes, and they are still surviving. So those are the strong stuff. They bring those in and they cut them into tiny little pieces through a process known as microfragmentation. It sounds fancy, but literally they just run them through a tile saw. And so they create these little pieces about the size of your fingernail. Then we glue them to these ceramic pucks that are a little bit bigger than a quarter. We put them in a nursery and we allow them to grow until they cover that puck. Depending on the species, that can take anywhere from 2 to 8 months. But we don't stop there. Mote puts all of these corals through something called a chaos system. And essentially what that does is it puts these guys through stressful environments. So they ramp the temperature up and drop the pH to levels that they anticipate will be on the reef 20, 30, 40 years from now. And so the corals that survive these treatments, those are the ones that eventually get transplanted on the reef. So we're really trying to hedge our bets and put our resources towards those corals that are going to have the highest chance of survival. But Mote doesn't stop there. They also do something called assisted reproduction. So they will take 2 strains of corals. They'll take the sperm from one, say that is really great at dealing with high temperatures, and the eggs from another that's, say, great with dealing with disease prevalence, and they will crossbreed those. And so they've been able to come up with just over 1,500 different strains of corals, all that have some of these characteristics that hopefully will help them survive these stressful conditions that we know they're probably going to face whenever they get out to the reef. So huge shout out to Mote for everything that they do behind the corals that they give us. So the way that we transplant corals depends on the species. And all of our transplanting protocols we did adopt from Mote because they have years of science and testing to make sure we can use the best ones for our coral survivorship. For our bouldering corals, so our star corals, our brain corals, we put these guys out using a process known as reskinning. So we take advantage of those old dead coral heads out on the reef. We go out with scrub brushes and we scrub all the algae off, and we glue these pucks onto this coral head. Now, as these pucks grow, they're able to put all their energy towards just growing that tissue. They don't have to make their own skeleton because they can use what's already underneath them. And so as the tissue meets, it recognizes that they came from the same parent colony and they fuse. And so the result is they're not having to create their own skeleton, and they're able to fuse with their neighbors. And so we're able to get a coral head in just 2 years that naturally can take up to 20 years to get to be that size. So not only are these corals out there and they are contributing to the current populations, they're providing food, they're providing resources, they're helping to support that reef, they're also contributing to future populations. So Moat transplanted a coral using that skinning method in 2015, monitored it for up to 5 years, and during 2020, it spawned. So there at the end, you hear them screaming in the background because this is incredible. Naturally, it can take a coral 40 to 50 years to get to a size where it can spawn all on its own. And so this is the key to restoration moving forward. This is the goal. We want these corals to be out there to sustain themselves through the future, and hopefully restoration work will be a thing of the past. So one of the other species that we work with that you might have heard of is elkhorn coral. So these guys, they are actually a branching coral species, but we grow them just like a bouldering coral. So we grow them on these pucks, and then we transplant them out onto the reef in these kind of tight clusters. For some reason, within the first month, the parrotfish really love to snack on these guys. You can see in that middle picture, there's not a whole lot of coral cover left, but they come back fiercely, they fuse, and they start to really grow. So that picture on the right is 12 months after we transplanted it. After about 15 months, these guys really start to create these crowns and come up. And so this is that typical branching behavior that we see in these guys. And we're putting all of these out at Alligator Reef, so hopefully we'll be able to really rebuild that ledge. When you come down, if you dive this site, you'll be able to see a lot of those elkhorn corals that we've been putting out. Now, probably the most well-known coral in the restoration game is staghorn coral. This is a sister species to the elkhorn coral, and it's one of the fastest growers. So these guys can double their size in about 6 months. But how we get them is very similar. We go out to a natural colony, we take a clipping, and we put them in a nursery to grow. But these guys like the offshore environment, so we put them on these PVC coral trees to grow in a nursery. And then we go out and we take clippings of them, and to transplant them to the reef, this is what you saw mostly in that video. We put a masonry nail down, we hammer it into the bottom, and we secure that fragment to the nail using a cable tie. Now we put these corals out in clusters of 5 fragments, again, that all came from that same parent colony. So this is one of our sites called Rocky Top, and these staghorn corals are about a year old. So you can see not only did they grow up and out, they've started fusing with their neighboring corals. And if you look really closely towards the bottom of the colony, you can see where that cable tie is now completely overgrown by the coral, and they'll secure themselves into the bottom. So we're really proud of these guys. Everything loves going to Rocky Top. So we are a relatively new organization. We just hit our 2-year anniversary last month, but we've been very busy in those 2 years. So we've transplanted just over 9,500 coral fragments to our reefs, and these are all from 6 different coral species. We have a variety of reefs where we're transplanting. So we've got shallow patch reefs, and we've also got deeper spur and groove reefs, which allows us to be able to still run trips even if it's a little bit windy. Like I mentioned earlier, we do a formal monitoring at 1 month post-out planning, and our survivorship is just under 87%, which I'm very proud of that number. Another number I'm really proud of is the number of people that have come through our program. We have educated just under 1,900 individuals through our programs, diving, and our educational programs. So again, another really awesome number that I'm proud of. I've only got a couple more slides, but I want to focus in on some of the other projects that we've got going on that people can get involved in. I'm a firm believer that we can't do everything well, so we've got some really great collaborative efforts going on. You might have heard of REEF. So REEF is the Reef Environmental and Education Foundation, and they focus in on counting the fish that are on our reef sites. So we have a partnership with REEF where their divers will come to our transplant sites and count the fish there so we can get an idea of how the diversity and abundance of these fishes are changing over time. We also have a really cool collaboration where we're working on sponge restoration. So I used to think that sponges were these huge competitors with corals, but it turns out that's not the case. So the sponges actually act as glue on the reef and will help secure structure to allow for more areas for coral to settle. And then in addition, these sponges do amazing things like filter water and provide all of these habitats for creatures inside. And so we've been working with a PhD student from Florida State to run sponge restoration trips. So on Wednesdays in May and June, because she has to go to school the rest of the year, she comes down and we start to do some sponge restoration trips with our divers. So I mentioned earlier about scrubbing algae. So one of the biggest competitors with coral is a large algae called macroalgae. So this might be your fleshy algae or your calcareous algae you see on the reef. We go out and do our best to remove this algae. But unfortunately, our divers can only do so much. We're not there all the time. So we are trying to enhance the populations of the creatures that naturally eat that algae. So we've been working with Caribbean king crabs as a collaborative project with, again, MOTE, as well as the College of the Florida Keys. So we dive in some sometimes really sketchy areas like the channel at Bud and Mary's Marina, and we go out and we collect female crabs. Ideally, we like for them to have eggs, but if they don't, they tend to get pregnant very quickly. We take them down to the lab, the MOTE lab on Summerlin Key, where the males are very excited. And then once the females start to hatch their eggs, we grow those individuals up to a size where they're no longer bite size. Then we'll put them out onto our reefs and monitor what's happening to the algal abundances, and hopefully they're helping to graze down that algae. And so I talked a lot about I.CARE, what we do. This was just a little teaser. If you come down and you're involved in one of our dives, our team of I.CARE staff and interns will give you a much more in-depth look at what we do and talk to you a lot more about coral ecology and some of the different things that we do. So how can you get involved to be a part of the solution? We've got a lot of different ways. You can book a dive trip with one of our partnering dive shops pretty much every Saturday and the third Sunday of every month. We also run eco-discovery snorkel trips with Islander Girl out of Captain Slate's in Tavernier. And so every Friday we put an I.CARE staff member on the boat. They jump in the water and talk to people about what they're seeing in the water. If you are really excited about the fish aspect, you can always either become a reef diver or you can work with some of their volunteers to go out and do some of those fish surveys. And to keep updated on all of our different side projects and where we are, you can follow us on social media at I Care About Coral on both Facebook and Instagram. And you can sign up for our newsletter at our website at icareaboutcoral.org. So I love the term community. It means so much to me. We are a project that is doing this work by the community. We have our army of local and visiting divers that come down and they get their feet wet, literally, and they do all of this work for the community. Not only for the community of the Florida Keys to help support our way of life, but also for that Florida reef tract, for all of those different organisms that interact with it, and to help us make sure that our corals have a future. So I really have to thank everybody that has been involved up to this point. This is my version of an acknowledgement slide. Our support and funding comes from all sorts of different areas, from businesses to individuals, from grants, and this truly has been a community effort of people trying to jump in and help us get this problem solved. So that's all I have for you guys tonight. If you are at all interested or have any ideas about additional ways we can interact with the community, feel free to reach out to us at our email address. This is the phone number for both myself and for my co-founder, Mike. If you want to learn more information about our schedule, you can visit our website at icareaboutcoral.org. And we really hope to see you at the end of February, which I'm sure they're going to give you some more information about. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
I loved it.
Here you go. Now they can.
Excellent presentation. I loved it.
Thank you.
Really great.
Awesome. So we do have some questions. Rachel, why don't you go ahead and
I have a couple of questions for you. When they was talking about the different that fuse the corals, have you ever had like a similar but not the same species of coral fuse when they're growing close together?
I missed the first part of that question.
When we were talking earlier about how the same species of coral growing close together, they'll eventually fuse. Have you ever had a similar species but not the same, like a crossbreed of them fuse together?
I've never seen it. There are instances of hybrid species, so I'm not sure if that's where people are going, but I think that happens a little bit more on the reproduction side. So Acropora prolifera is an example of a cross between elkhorn and staghorn coral.
Yeah.
But we don't really see that here in the Florida Keys.
Okay, cool. One more question, actually two more questions. So we were talking about algae for some people that, don't know why, what causes, first of all, algae blooms, and why are they harmful to the ocean? Why are they harmful to corals?
It's a really great question. So algae is naturally supposed to be there, but they're thriving in conditions that are stressful to corals. So that warm water that stresses corals, the algae is just growing like crazy. And so as these algae grow, they will smother live corals where they can no longer get sunlight, and they're not able to photosynthesize. The tiny algal cells inside the corals are not able to photosynthesize. And they're also taking up all of the available substrate. So new baby corals are not able to find the space to settle to start a new colony. There are a couple different things that have been linked to the proliferation and that big increase of algae. Some of it has been water quality and too many nutrients in the water that can also cause an algal bloom.
Okay. And what do you think is like the major contributor to the decline of coral?
That's also a really great question. So corals they can be really good at dealing with one, maybe two stressors. But the problem is we're throwing so many stressors at them at once that they don't have a chance. They're dealing with global factors like warming temperatures, local factors like people being on the reef and kicking them, or nutrient loads or pollution that's going on. And so they just are not able to withstand things that they normally do, like competition or predation. And so I really think it's a lot of different factors that our system is just not balanced anymore.
Okay, great. Looks like Sarah has a question. Can you also use sea urchins to help crabs eat the algae, because urchins eat algae?
That is a really great question and a really awesome point. You are absolutely right. Specifically, the long spine sea urchin is a big grazer of these different algal types. The problem is research is being done to try to get these urchins to breed in captivity. They can get them to breed, they can get the larvae to settle, but once they get to a certain time point, their populations crash. They get big mortality events. They're really close to cracking it. I believe it's the University of Florida and Frost Museum has been doing a lot of work on this. And they've partnered with the FWC to get the few urchins that have survived out onto the reef to look at, do they act like an urchin? When you breed anything in captivity, you have to take into account that they haven't been exposed to predators. So the urchins they put out actually hang out during the daytime. So all of their predators are like, woohoo, free snacks. Mm-hmm. So they do, they're doing a lot of research to really try to help with the urchin populations. But because crabs are so much easier to breed in captivity.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Kylie. And Michael, I don't know if we have any questions for you, but maybe you can help Rachel go into what is it like to come down and do the dives with you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up on the screen. This is our 4C event page that you guys are looking at here. And if you go to the top, you just hit events. That's where you're going to scroll down and you're going to find our restoration weekend, February 24th to the 25th. You click on it and basically, Rachel, they're going to join you and the I.CARE team down in Islamorada, working in coral restoration. So there's it's Friday and Saturday. So Mike, what do they expect to see or hear on the evening of Friday?
Yeah, Friday they're coming up here to Boynton first.
Okay,
cool. Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, hold on, Mike. Sorry, you're muted.
Stand by.
There.
Sorry, you can hear you.
Aha, there we go. Fantastic. That's better. So on the 25th, what I think is pretty exciting to start the day is going to be the tour, because you guys are on the 24th are going to get a hands-on workshop right up in Boynton Beach. Right. Yeah, so we're going to come up there. We're going to give you all the opportunity to learn, put the coral down on some these wood planks, figure out how to mix the epoxy, how we're going to, I'm not sure exactly what species we're going to be working with. It's either going to be staghorn or mountainous star coral. So you're going to learn both those species, how to put those down. And then on the 25th, you get a tour of the coral nursery at Bud and Mary's, operated by Mote Marine Laboratories, which is really cool. There's thousands of coral fragments there on site. And then have a little lunch, get out on the boat, run out to the reef and go put down some coral. We usually put down with a group like this, probably, I don't know, anywhere between 100 and 150 corals on the dive.
So cool.
So it's loads of fun. I tell you, and I've been diving for, I don't know, I hate to tell you how long. It's scary, but it's probably the most exciting thing that I do. And then when I get around folks that have been diving for decades like me, it's pretty universal. They come back and say that is one of the best dives I've ever done in my life. It really feels good to be providing and giving back, and not just taking pictures and seeing all the creatures and critters, but giving back to the next generation, which is really important.
So do you have a certification requirement to be able to do these dives?
Yep, we do. We'd like to see people have roughly 30 dives or their advanced open water. Sometimes we give a little flexibility on that. If you guys tell me that this diver is got it all going on, it's got good buoyancy control, and they have 15 dives, but you saw them in the water last week and they can absolutely handle this, perfect. That's great. I mean, you guys have some tougher dive conditions up that way, probably a little bit more so than we do down here. So you probably have a little bit more sturdy diver, I would guess. So we give you a little bit of latitude there. You tell us they're good, that's good enough for us, but that's our general rule. But when we talk to someone who walks in the door that we don't know.
Awesome. Yeah, because that's the key, right? We don't want people who don't have good buoyancy and crashing down on these poor little baby corals.
Yeah, or kicking them.
Are you diving air, nitrox? What is the profile there?
We typically would dive air, but it doesn't hurt. Actually, lately it's been not a bad idea on one of our sites, because we've been doing a double dip at 45 to 55 feet. It probably wouldn't hurt to dive one of those on enriched air. But typically we're doing our dives on air. Most of our sites are between 15 and 30 feet, but then lately we've been working in a little bit deeper areas.
Do you have any gear requirements that they need to make sure that they have or they shouldn't have? Like, are they allowed to wear gloves?
Yeah, good, really good question. No gloves. I don't recommend them. Some people have some, allergies to certain things and they don't want to touch. I get it. That's fine. But as a general rule, no gloves. And I'm really not a big fan of the big freediving fins. I think those really get in the way. It's common sense. We don't want to be kicking too much. So a shorter fin is much better. Actually, some of those go fins, those little travel fins are absolutely ideal for what we're doing because we're not really swimming a long distance, right? We're just sitting in one place doing a bunch of work. You're making slight adjustments to your buoyancy, moving left or right, but you're really not swimming great distances. So having a big powerful fin really isn't that important.
Okay, awesome.
If someone can't make the workshop on Friday night up here in Boynton, can they still come on Saturday?
Yeah, absolutely they can. We're not going to be able to put coral in their hand in the same way that everyone that did attend and participate in the workshop, but they can certainly come down, watch, learn, be a part of it, get them excited for the next time we come down.
And just to add for Christopher Wolf's question, we don't need overnight because we're really not that far from Islamorada. So we're going to be doing the workshop Friday night, and then you can go home, go to sleep, and then in the morning we'll drive up. But the dives aren't until the afternoon.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think we got everybody's questions answered, and everyone knows now where to go on our website to find our trip. It's right there. It's only $175, guys. That is just an amazing price to be able to go down there and help the coral reefs in the Islamorada. So go ahead, add it to your cart, join us. Let's go diving.
And let me just add what's actually included in that. You have the night that they're coming up here for the coral workshop, the next day nursery tour, dives, and we will include the tanks for you, but you have to drive them down because I cannot fit everybody's tanks in my car.
Okay. So everybody that registered on our Eventbrite for tonight, we put your name in a random name picker for our SDI Nitrox digital kit. So if you are not Nitrox certified and you want to take that class, here we go. Let's see who the winner is. Da-da-da-da. Oh boy. Oh boy. Lisa Randall. Lisa, you are the winner for tonight's presentation. We will email you with directions on how to get that code set up so that you can get your Nitrox certification with 4C. Awesome. Guys, thank you so much for what a wonderful presentation, not just about corals, but about what you guys are doing to help corals in our local area and what us divers can do. Now we have the information, and if you guys can't make it to the one that we have scheduled, make sure that you reach out to them, and we'll do some more of these, obviously.
Yeah, if it becomes a hit, maybe we'll do it regularly with you guys. I love this, and I really love the idea. I love everything you guys are doing. Keep at it. It's excellent.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining in and for having us.
All righty.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. All right, everybody at home, thank you for watching. We'll see you later.
Bye, guys.
Bye.